starting.
Okay, so it is August 8th at 12:03, and we're calling the meeting of the Vermont Community Broadband Board to order. We have all board members in attendance with staff. We have Stan, Christine, Rob, and Alyssa. Christine, am I missing anybody?
Yeah.
Alyssa is actually here.
Kristen Bringa is with us as well, and Alyssa is not with us.
Oh, Alyssa's not?
Yeah, Alyssa's out. This is Kristen Bringa with Department of Public Service. I'm filling in for her.
Yeah, she'll be taking. Kristen will be taking the notes.
Okay, thank you, Kristen. So no Alyssa, but replaced with Kristen. Anybody else?
We have Kristen Fountain with her hand up from NEK.
We're not going to take comments just yet.
Sorry, that was a mistake. Sorry.
Okay, we get the meeting rolling. First order of business, we just did the roll call. First order of business is, are there any agenda changes to the agenda that was posted from staff or board members?
I'm just letting you know that I'm having camera problems, so I don't know why I'm not going video, but Teams doesn't like my camera today.
Okay, thanks, Holly. All right, hearing no changes, I'm going to make a motion to approve the agenda as posted. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, Dan seconded the motion. Is there any discussion? All right, hearing none. All those in favor of the agenda as posted, please say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay. First item of business is to approve 3 sets of board minutes. I'm going to start with July 1st. I was not at that meeting, so I'm not going to make a motion and would entertain a motion from one of the other board members that was in attendance for that meeting.
So moved. I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second on the table. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor of the July 1 minutes, please say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Abstain. I wasn't
Patty.
present.
Okay, no opposed, 2 abstentions. Dan is abstaining and Patty is abstaining. Laura, you had a question?
Yes. Note, do we need to say who we are, noting that we have somebody different, I think, taking minutes?
Christine, what is your thought on that?
Kristen, do you know everybody who's on the phone?
Yep, you're good. Continue on.
Okay, and Krista, if you have any questions along the way, feel free to jump in and say, just clarify, say who's doing what.
All right, will do. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And good suggestion, Laura. Appreciate that. The next set of minutes is July 11th. I was in attendance at that meeting, so I'm going to make a motion that we approve the minutes as posted. Do we have a second?
Second.
I've got a second on the table. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? No opposed. Any abstentions? Okay, great. July 15th is the next set of meeting minutes. I got to check to see if I was there. Give me a second. I got to roll down here.
You were there.
You have me listed?
Yep.
All right, okay, thank you. I'll make a motion that we approve the July 15th minutes as posted. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion of July 15? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No opposition. And are there any abstentions? Okay, no abstentions. All right, minutes are approved. All right, first substantive item on the agenda then, introduction to Deputy Secretary of Administration, Doug Farnham. Christine, I'll let you tee it up. Welcome, Doug.
All right, this is, Doug has agreed to come in and speak about his role in terms of the BEAD, the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program that's coming up. He is the contact point for the state officially. There's another term for it. You might know what it is, Doug, but I will tell you, Doug has been quite the asset. He's been we have access to the portal. We've been filing the grants, the digital equity grant. Doug, I value Doug's review of it, and he turned it around in one day. It was very impressive. So I just want to give a real positive marks for the support Doug has given us. So Doug, why don't you take it away from there?
Absolutely. Thank you, Christine, and thank you for having me, Madam Chair, members of the board. I'd like to start out by giving a brief overview of what the Agency of Administration has done since the beginning of the pandemic, and a little bit of the structural background, and a lot of that kind of feeds into my designation as the point of contact for the VEED program. So shortly after the declaration of the pandemic, Agency of Administration consulted with VEM, Vermont Emergency Management. And I wasn't with the agency at that point. It's primarily Brad Furland, worked with Erica Borneman at VEM. And we determined that the state did not have the internal administrative resources to really deal with the potential uses and the evaluation of a lot of the pandemic funding sources that were coming down. The CRF was the main one at that point in time. And it had, specific rules and certain elements of uniform guidance that applied and certain elements that didn't. And it was going to be used in a vastly different way than we've seen federal money deployed in Vermont historically. So we worked with the legislature and contracted we RFP'd competitively, and we ended up working with Guidehouse to provide us risk analysis and funding prioritization review, basically helping us navigate the pandemic federal funding sources. And so we formed the Coronavirus Financial Office, which is primarily members of Department of Financial Management, AOA, and members of the Guidehouse teams of the vendors or contractors. And Brad Furland headed up that office, and then he transitioned it to me when I moved over to AOA from the tax department. Prior to working with AOA, I was at the tax department for 9 years in various roles, from policy director, property director. I was a project director for the implementation of the computer system at one point, and when the pandemic started, I was the deputy commissioner at taxes. So wore a number of hats over there, but then moved over to AOA. And the primary role over the last 2 years, which, I don't think any of us anticipated CRF being followed by state fiscal recovery, and now BEAD and all of the other various federal funding sources that came out of the IIJA or the Bill Act, whichever messaging document you read. I guess it's got at least those two names at this point. But state fiscal recovery kind of ramped up the requirements, extended the term. It's much longer term than Coronavirus Relief Fund. And at this point, the office that I lead as my other hat, in addition to my normal deputy secretary duties, has rated over 300 programs, construction, to make sure it's consistent with the federal rules and internal controls are all in place. So that's primarily why, when the conversation around the BEAD point of contact came up, the governor's office selected me as the point of contact, only to help oversee from a general construction perspective and a coordination with all of the other federal pandemic related, infrastructure related spending that what the Vermont is doing right now. We're doing a historical amount of work in broadband, housing, water, sewer, and one of my hats is to make sure people talk to each other. And I want to say the Christine and her staff have been amazing about collaborating with other areas of state government, always very proactive, always keeping an eye on making sure. I think the example everyone loves is, that we're not tearing up a sidewalk and, to put fiber down, or, I'm sorry, that's probably a horrible example, but we're not doing construction and then doing construction in the same spot 3 months later when we do a water project or a housing project, or so we're coordinating and putting in and making sure that the broadband board is aware of what projects are planned on the housing side. And I would say we are still improving our project tracking. There's a lot of data, and we're still kind of improving those methods, and also trying to be sensitive to the fact that all of these different areas have different complexities. Affordable housing projects are all very public, and they're very public funding stacks, but the broadband sector, for instance, has many different factors to consider, and information has to be treated with a little bit a different type of respect. And one of my hats is making sure we only report up to Treasury what we need to. We absolutely need to meet the Treasury requirements, but that we don't harm ourselves or our relationships with anyone by over-reporting. So trying to strike that balance and making sure we're collecting the necessary data, but we're not over collecting, and we're not overbuilding, because sometimes we can get carried away, if with things we want to know. But I think coordination is one of the primary reasons I have been involved with BEAD, and like Christine said, we're setting the portal up so that her and her staff are able to edit and fill in any area of the applications and the submissions. And then I do a final review and approval just to make sure everything lines up and there's not any missed opportunities in there. So I'm a horrible one for not preparing remarks, so I apologize if I rambled a bit there, but that's the general landscape and how I'm involved with. I'm also, of course, involved in the ARPA Capital Projects Funds, which 95 million of that is being distributed through the broadband board, and the 150 million that was approved last year by the legislature of state fiscal recovery. So keeping an eye on all of those various federal funding sources moving around. And then I also have the joy of coordinating corrective action plans when auditors find issues with how we've administered our programs. So I follow up on the back end and make sure we strengthen our programs and avoid issues going forward where possible.
Great, thanks, Doug. That was very helpful. What we'll do, we have a very active board, so we'll pepper you with a few questions. I saw Holly's hand up, so we'll start with Holly, and then I'll go second.
Hi, Doug. How are you? Glad you're here. Could you tell us, I hope I'm not remiss in not knowing this fact, but it sounds as though we have filed our application for BEAD money already. And I'm wondering what you see as the total amount of that application that's come through you at this juncture.
So we've completed certain elements. We have filed the application for the digital equity access portion, the smaller money that's for planning. I don't have the exact dollar amount, but I think it's somewhere around $500,000. And then we have filed the letter of intent with the designation to satisfy the first gate of the BEAD program, participation in the BEAD program. But we are, Christine, I believe we have, what is it, one more week to finalize and submit our larger BEAD application?
Yes, and I'll provide an update in staff updates, but we're well on the way to have that completed.
Thank you.
Doug, this is Patty Richards. Just a couple of questions for you. Just in general, any things that you could share with us for the VCBB to maximize our partnership with you in terms of the grant administration and making sure all of our ducks are in a row? Are there any things that you need from us? Obviously, in addition to staff time, but just if you can comment on what we can do to leverage this partnership, because it's vitally important to our success. Obviously, you're in charge of it, but it's also important to the VCBB's success.
No, that's an excellent question, Madam Chair. I think the biggest thing that's going to be coming up over the next 6 months is that we have a lot of people in Vermont who are experienced professionals, but they're also doing an activity that's slightly different than they've historically done. We have federal money moving through a lot of channels, which are either new channels or have not traditionally held federal money with full uniform guidance. So I've been working with your staff to develop trainings related to uniform guidance specifically for the CUDs. And I think just some unity in making sure everyone understands the value of that training, the necessity of providing that training, so we all get through this, spend the money properly, don't get in any trouble with the feds. I think is a prudent step, and I'd appreciate partnership from the board on that, because the relationships are primarily a relationship between the board and those CUDs. And it is complex, and there are a lot of pitfalls that if we're not careful, we could fall into. But this is a huge priority of both the governor and the legislature. So I think we need to work through them, and we need to get the money out there. We can't let it slow us down. So I think our trainings are designed to try to help with some of that, and of course, hopefully help build some of the comfort levels out there. And then as well, hopefully take some of the pressure off your staff to be responding to a lot of one-off questions or repeat questions. So I'm hoping those trainings go well and are well attended. It was our intention to mandate that the subrecipients attend those trainings. And I think some people can view mandates for things like that as distasteful, but I just think because of the novelty of all of this, and because of over $345 million from different funding sources overlapping, it's going to be really important that we all get trained.
Should that include training for the board at some level?
Great question. I think there is some training that I think Christine's staff could benefit from. A different type of training, more focused at the role from the recipient level. And then I don't know that it'd be necessarily framed as training for the board, but maybe information and presentations that the board might find helpful. Because I think a lot of it is very technical, uniform guidance. These are what the federal requirements are, and this is how you satisfy them. I know from experience now over the last 2 years, the plain language of uniform guidance is rarely what you're actually required to do. There's a lot of interpretation and history that goes into navigating those uniform guidance, that uniform guidance, and it's not so apparent just when you go in and read the words. So I don't think that the board will need as much, because it shouldn't drive the policy decisions you're making. It's more of a process buttress than anything on the policy side. I think that the board will be faced with some decisions about how and where these three major funding pots should be deployed. And I can help with the eligibility discussions around, what type of money can be used for what. But I do know Christine and her staff are equally knowledgeable, or perhaps more knowledgeable in that area. So I'm happy to help support discussions there. But I think the policy support, I think that Christine and her staff have you covered there, but I'm of course happy to help.
Thank
And
you.
I think areas where we get stuck, we're also able to submit questions to Guidehouse. If it's related to any federal funding source, they are more focused on state fiscal recovery and ARPA capital projects, but we are able to, they do have centralized resources across the country for the BEAD program, for all of these other pandemic funding sources. So we are able to submit questions to them and see if they come up with any helpful information.
Yeah, just to let you know that we have staff has a weekly meeting with Guidehouse and Doug and we've kept that pretty active in terms of making sure we're staying aligned in terms of what how we performed the grant requirements.
Excellent. That's really helpful. And I really like that comment relative to training for the fund recipients. It's not just what the VCBB does, but it's also what they do. And the more they understand what their requirements are, obviously that will assure funds are being spent appropriately. We certainly don't want to get flagged in any way, shape, or form. One other question, Doug. Given the magnitude of all the compliance requirements, what do you have resources at your disposal to help you out, or are you a one-person show? Help us with that. How do you get it all done?
We are a little bit light right now, and I think that AOA was given. We were very grateful that we were given by the legislature $6.5 million and then another $10.5 million for over the course of state fiscal recovery to use to backfill administrative needs related to one of the uses is permitting programs and A&R. A lot of this work is going to create more demand on permitting programs, and we may need to fund more staff in permitting to avoid delaying broadband projects or housing or water projects. But also, we have an additional financial manager that we pulled on who specifically works with ARPA, and I'm also hiring a reporting manager to work with that. And then part of the purpose of that $17 million is to fund the guidehouse contract and the policy and evaluation and support that we run through with them. They are, I will say, they have been great with us. They've actually identified more funding opportunities than we have spent on the contract with them. So they have actually made the state of Vermont more than whole in our relationship with them, but they are expensive. They are not cheap. And so wherever possible, we're filling additional capacity with limited service positions. We just had to go back to the Joint Fiscal Committee for that. And then if we cannot fill it, if we cannot meet the need with that, then we're drawing on Guidehouse. With the exception of the policy analysis and what other states are doing, that we're generally going to Guidehouse first because they have over 20 state and local partnerships dealing with pandemic funds. So they just have easy access to a lot of information that the state doesn't compile. So I think that's the primary area where I'm getting help from them on, and we rely on them to help compile our federal reporting. And we have over 100 active programs with ARPA right now. So just the compilation of the data and reports is a fairly monumental task.
Yeah, it does sound very large, a lot going on there. Thank you for that. I see Laura's hands up.
Yeah, thanks, Doug. This is really helpful. I actually have a quick question, I think for Christine, just related to having our grant recipients participate in some of this training, and just thinking about capacity for that participation. Do all of our CUDs in your assessment have the capacity to participate in that training at this point, either through an executive director or a partner? Or
Yeah,
is that something that a few are not there yet?
Well, yes, I do believe they all have the capacity. We have not had problems with participation in the past. The CUDs have been pretty cooperative, even those that don't have an executive director. So I don't anticipate a problem here.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, Brian or Dan, do you have any questions?
I do not.
Patty.
Thank you, Doug, for the work that you're doing here.
I've got one quick question for Christine.
Go ahead.
Christine, this may be coming up in staff reports, but I'm not really clear looking at Act 71 what the VCBB's role is vis-a-vis this BEAD money. And you're about to file a grant application, right? Is that something that we should be reviewing, or is that outside our purview? I don't see the structure.
I'd be glad to share with you. Yeah, let's talk about that in staff updates. I don't think that we should be, the board should be requiring the board approval of that because the process is so fast. But I'll provide that in the staff updates.
It's kind of got more to do with the statutory authority in my world, but okay, let's talk about it.
Okay, yeah, that's a good point, Holly. Regardless of the requirement of speed, if it's, we have to make sure we're checking the boxes in terms of state law relative to what we're required to do or not do. So if,
Well, I'll rely heavily on Stan for those answers.
yeah.
Yeah.
um,
I may be
and
able to add
certainly,
something
Doug,
there, Madam Chair,
any
as well.
advice you have on that is appreciated.
Doug, what did you say?
Sorry, I said I may be able to add something there as well. So I believe the way the authority will flow to acquire the necessary authority, because this is not a program contemplated under statute, it will go through the normal joint fiscal committee process to accept the federal gift and to delegate the authority to, in this case, the plan that's being submitted is that I'm the point of contact, but the implementing entity is the Vermont Community Broadband Board. So that is how the Vermont Community Broadband Board will acquire the authority from the legislature in order to carry out the federal grant.
Thank you.
That is
And I
very
also approve the AA-14s as they go to that. So I'll be reviewing that package as part of my role in AOA.
That's very helpful. Thank you. Okay, any other questions or comments to Doug before he leaves? And you're always welcome to stay if you'd like. Great,
Well,
hearing nothing, we're all set to go. Thank you very much, Doug, for your time. It's very helpful to have you join us, and thank you for all your work that you're doing.
Thank you for having me, Madam Chair. It was great to meet the board. I've been wanting to for a while, but just been, a little bit busy for the last year or so, but I'm really happy we got a chance to meet.
Yes, ditto.
Thanks, Doug.
All right, stay well. Okay, next on our agenda is an update on the ongoing investigation involving ValleyNet and EC Fiber.
Yeah,
Christine, is there anything in public comment before we go to executive session?
Yeah, I want to give FX an opportunity to say anything he wants to say publicly, then to go into executive session because this is a legal issue. We'll talk about.
Can I ask this question, which I believe belongs on the record? Does this event with this contractor affect any of our grant monies? Like, was the money that's the financial reporting that's involved, does it have anything to do with a grant that we gave to EC Fiber?
Well, since that's why I think it's important for the board to be completely aware of everything that's going on here, because something like greater than 2/3 of the money that we've allocated has gone to ValleyNet. So since this is a ValleyNet issue,
it's gone to 2/3 of $100 million has gone to ValleyNet?
No, 2/3 of the money we've granted so far to EC Fiber.
Oh, to EC Fiber. Okay.
And we've moved EC Fiber into a high risk category as a result of this. Out of an abundance of caution. When it comes to grant making, there's low, medium, and high risk. And Kristen Bringa is the expert on this, but we've all agreed that we'll move them into high risk category for the.
Who's Kristen?
Kristen is our grant person. She's taking notes right now. Kristen.
Oh, sorry.
Filling in for Alyssa.
Sorry.
No, you're okay.
Christine, why don't we let Stan give a tiny bit of overview before we go in?
All right.
Yeah, at this point, Holly, we don't know if any of the money that we have provided, any of the grant money is involved. We don't believe so, but they're still doing an accounting, so we want to hear from them to hear what they have had to say, but we don't believe it has based on the information we have now.
Good to know. Thanks, Stan.
Sure.
FX, would you like to say anything before we go into executive session?
Yes, certainly. Hang on a second here. Okay, so first of all, number one, I was caught by surprise to see this item on the agenda. Nobody on the board or staff contacted me in advance to have any discussions. Secondly, the what has happened is just killing all of us, because we basically pulled this network out of the ground with absolutely no government support of any kind, of any meaningful kind, over a period of many years before we succeeded in drafting the legislation that created CUDs. And then we were the only entity to take advantage of that legislation and have borrowed $65 million to build out this network, which we're not even done building. We're probably going to have to borrow more money to finish building. And, the amount of money that appears to have been embezzled based on the best information we have right now is less than what we're taking in every month at this point. If that money had not gone missing in small portions over the last 10 years, we would have had to have borrowed, 64.5 million instead of 65 million. So just to put a little dimension on this issue, those are a few factors to keep in mind. The other thing is that over the course of my time as chair of the district board, and the East Central Vermont Telecommunications District owns a business that operates under the trade name EC Fiber. The district is not called EC Fiber. The district is called the East Central Vermont Telecommunications District. It owns a business that you call EC Fiber because that's our trade name. The district hires ValleyNet to design, build, and operate the network that is the core of that business. That's the way things are now. The way things were before we became a district is that it was hard to tell where ValleyNet started and EC Fiber, left off. Because you know what? It was a bunch of volunteers kind of trying to figure out how to do it, doing it on a very catch-as-catch-can basis, not hiring in crack professionals and, staffing it out like we were, a real entity. Why? Because that wasn't affordable. And we were borrowing money in $2,500 dribs and drabs. So it was amazing that we were able to raise $6 or $7 million over a 6 or 7 year period and get a network operating and have good audited financials for 3 years and be in a position to go to the municipal bond banks or marketplace, only to be told get out of here. We don't know what you are. Our risk analysts don't know what an interlocal contract is. Go away. So that's why we had to draft the legislation that became the CUD legislation. That's why we had to become Vermont's first CUD in 2016, so that less than 90 days later, boom, we had borrowed $7 million and we paid off half of our local loan folks. But all of this was being done hand to mouth, right? And there was a lot of sloppiness because of that. And when I became chair, I thought, this is fantastic. I'm finally chair. I'm finally going to know what's going on inside the business of EC Fiber. Because when I was on the board, I was very frustrated with the reports that I would get, with the information that I would get, right? Very frustrated. So now I thought, okay, this is all going to be revealed. Well, you know what I found out? What I found out was nobody really had the time to work on any reports like that. Nobody had the time to do anything at that level. They were all dancing as fast as they could to get this thing built and to figure out how to manage a business that was growing by leaps and bounds every day. So at that point, I began to change my tune and I began to say, we got to hire more people. We can't have one person doing all the accounting work, because that person gets sick and then I don't see the quarterlies until 2 quarters are gone. Okay, yes. We were
I would
having,
like to,
hang on, Holly, I got to finish because I've been brought into this, so I'm going to have my
yes,
say.
but you're
Thank you.
on the you are on the record. I just
That's
want
right, I'm on the record, and I'm happy to be on the record, Holly.
Okay.
Okay, I'm happy to be on the record. All right. And and so the whole thing was we needed to get more professional, right? We needed to bring in more capacity. We needed to have more people knowing how to do the same things, right? We needed to get much better at our reporting. We needed to get much better at our data, okay? And when was this happening? Right at the beginning of the pandemic, at the same time that we were starting to testify to Laura's committee about what we should do with all the federal money that was coming in. Okay. And we had a lot of lessons to offer. And, you know, we actually spoke to this issue, maybe not as directly as I've just spoken. All right. Now, as a result of that, and as a result of the growing realization within ValleyNet that this was actually the case, ValleyNet began hiring more people, more professionals, and as a result, this issue of financial irregularities was uncovered. It wasn't uncovered because of somebody from the outside forcing us to do anything. It was uncovered because we have beefed up the professionalization of the business of the business that operates our business. And a lot of that was because of direction that our contractor ValleyNet was getting from our board and our leadership. All right. And so we are very happy that this has been uncovered, because obviously it needed to be, and it was uncovered because of the increasing professionalization of our staff. We're very happy that we're moving forward to having Great World Internet and ValleyNet partner and have GWI becoming the operating entity in a practical sense beginning next year. And we are quite comforted by the fact that From the perspective of our bonds, there's no issue. From the perspective of our operations, no issue. From the perspective of our bank account, no issue. To the extent that we're able to see these monies recovered and EC Fiber made whole, it's not going to make any material difference in our operation. It may advance by a month or two the time when we can be finished paying off our bonds, but we're already in that for 30 years, so it's going to be very hard to tell the difference. With that, I'm happy to go into executive session.
So before we move into executive session, we have to clear the hurdle of the information requires us to do so. So Christine, can you help us with that?
Yeah, this is, you know, this is to go into the status of the investigation and legal issues and provide a little more clarity as to what the nature of this is. Stan, can you weigh in on this?
Yeah, this is an ongoing investigation that falls under the provisions for executive session in the Vermont statutes. It's paragraph 313A of section 1.
Is it legal information that's being disclosed to the VCBB?
It's an information about an ongoing investigation.
Yeah, it's the will of the board. I mean, if the board feels that it doesn't need an executive session, we can move on to the next agenda item as well.
Yeah, I just want to make sure we're clear to go. Like, we shouldn't move into executive session unless it's a requirement. And I just want to make sure that this is something that is required for us to be talking in executive session versus public.
Oh, yes. I can pull up the.
Well, I don't think there's a question about the need to go into executive session to talk about the investigation itself and what the current findings are. It's just a question of whether the board wants to do that. You're on mute.
You're muted.
Either this is privileged information that we have the right to know, or it's not. And I would think it would have to be privileged information that would impact an existing EC Fiber application. I mean, because we have to have some reason to be considering it. So I don't know, Stan, if you can guide us. You know, is this not public information? Is it information that's material to the board's ability to deliberate on an application? Is there an application pending?
This is yeah, pending or probable civil litigation or prosecution. This clearly falls into that category that's identified in 313A1, and it relates to consideration of us giving a grant to EC Fiber.
Do we have an application pending, or is there a concern about a previously awarded application?
Yeah, we have an application that's
we
filed.
have a pre-application, yes.
And this is Kristen Bringa. It also has bearing on our grant monitoring of existing grants as well.
Okay.
All right, that's helpful. With
That's
that,
helpful.
yes, with that, I can see a connection of why we would go into executive session. But it's important that we paint and connect the dots, so we're just not running into executive session at a drop of a hat, and we really shouldn't be.
Agreed.
Okay, I am going to make a motion that we take this discussion into executive session as premature. General public knowledge would clearly place the VCBB or a person involved at a substantial disadvantage per Title I VSA Section 13 313A1. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All right, hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, let's move into executive session and we'll go from there. All right, so we're going to
Okay.
leave this. We're going to leave this website and go to the one
we-
provided by Rob.
I think we
Patty?
need to say who.
Oh,
Yeah,
I'm sorry. So it'll be VCBB,
and
representatives.
representatives,
VCBB's, hold on, the VCBB board staff, VCBB staff, represented from ValleyNet and EC Fiber.
correct.
Okay. With that, we'll go into executive session.
Okay.
Okay, see you on the other
Okay,
side.
everybody, we should be back in about less than 20 minutes. just working to spotlight board members.
I think we're waiting for Patty.
I don't know about you guys, but I'm absolutely melting over here. I know I'm made of butter, but
They'll be glad when this heat breaks. Well, let me see what's going on with Patty.
And looking for Brian as well.
Christine, are we waiting on Brian?
Is that Patty?
Yes, are we waiting on Brian?
Yeah, I'm texting him now.
Okay.
He says he's in the general meeting. Huh.
Is he in the next executive session already?
No, he says he's in the general meeting.
Oh, I see him now. Okay, Brian.
Okay, great. Great,
There we go.
excellent. Thanks, Brian.
I'm blaming that on Teams. No way, it's operator error.
Odds are you're right.
Take the
All right,
benefit of the doubt.
we are all here. Thanks for joining us, Brian. So we pull you out of the eternal virtual abyss. So no specific action was taken in executive session. We have, as a board, we had discussion in executive session that we would like to have in public session that, and I'm going to ask Holly and Laura to chime in here after I try to characterize it, that the VCBB recognizes the tremendous growth that EC fiber has come from over the last decade, but that squarely in front of us, that the VCBB is going to explore additional procedures to assure use of federal grant dollars are being used appropriately. Yeah, we're not faulting anyone, just that this is an opportunity for us to implement procedures to assure that funds are appropriately being spent. I'm going to ask Holly and Laura to reiterate their comments that were made in executive session.
I would only add to that, Patty, that the grant agreements should reflect an obligation that it clearly establishes an accounting function for contractors, not only for the CUG or grantee, but for contractors that make up a material portion of the grant work. And this could be consistent with federal regulations. I'm not an authority on that. But that we also are clear that we need to attribute some portion of the grant funding to be able to implement that work. Because while we acknowledge that CUDs are incredibly dedicated volunteers pulling together, this is a highly professional criteria, the tracking of money that needs to be assured. And we need to be able to assure the public. So not just the CUDs, but also the VCBB. And I ask that staff review our spending authority for our executive director to make sure that our procedures and practices are also adequate in that regard.
Thank you. Laura?
Thanks, Patty. So while this is an unfortunate incident, it has come about as a result of growth and increased professionalism that has come with that growth from both EC Fiber and their vendor. And so in that light, I consider this a win, that this really difficult to spot over time situation was caught and found. And this is exactly the type of situation that I know I and other legislators thought about when we thought about the types of support that our tremendous volunteers throughout the state, holding up our CUDs, what kind of supports they were going to need. Because while they bring all of the heart and they bring the accountability to ensuring that their neighbors are getting covered, we had no expectation that they would bring all of the controls that were necessary for the massive amounts of funding that are coming in. And so I'm glad that Christine brought this to the board, and the board has had an opportunity to talk about, what kinds of additional supports, contract language might be necessary to make sure that we are providing support and keeping all of our CUDs out of trouble in really this historic work that they're doing. So I think a lot of opportunity here and a lot of upside. I'm sorry for EC Fiber that this is happening, but it does sound like a good plan is in place. So thank you.
Thank you very much, both Laura and Holly, for those comments. Christine?
Yeah, and I would add, and thank you, board, for your recommendations and support. One of the things we'll take a close look at, is we want to make sure, just as the federal government is ensuring that we have the capacity at the VCB level to handle these grants, we are going to work with the CUDs to ensure the structure and capacity is in place. Because I know, you all have been working really hard as volunteers, and you're going to need some additional paid help in order to make sure we have the controls in place.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Yep.
All right. Anything else on item 4 and on our agenda with EC Fiber and the ValleyNet situation? All right. We are now going to move to item 5, which is an update on the confidential negotiations with Northwest Fiberworks and Lamoille FiberNet. Christine, do you want to tee this up in public session?
Yes. As you know, and folks on this call know, that Northwest and Lamoille have been negotiating with Google Fiber. I think they've come to a key turning point in those negotiations. The information provided will be needs to be provided in executive session, because it has it has serious implications on the business case.
Okay, I'll make a motion that we move into executive session, as general public knowledge would clearly place the public body, VCBB, or a person involved at a substantial disadvantage per Title I VSA Section 313A1. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, we'll move over to executive session.
And I assume that includes staff.
Yes, I'm sorry. Those being invited are VCBB board, staff, Northwest Fiberworks and Lamoille Fiber.
Thank you.
Thank you. Christine, let us know when we have everybody in attendance.
Okay.
I believe we have everybody.
Thanks, Rob.
Okay, we set to go?
We're set to go.
All right, item 6, we have a Southern Vermont Construction Grant application. Is that right? SOVT, Southern Vermont?
Yeah, Southern Vermont Communication Union District.
All right, do you want to tee us up, Christine?
Yes, we've done a deep dive on their application. It's very thorough. We've reviewed their agreement with Consolidated. It addresses the concerns around reporting and the performance standards. This is a very favorable application. You know, if you look at, and the error, by the way, I sent you a corrected copy. That was really the reference point that I talked about in the recommendation. You know, the average grant cost of the universal service plan across the state is $53.91. I arrived there by taking the $345 million in grant funds and divide that by the 64,000 under and unserved addresses to come up with a benchmark. The original error was I took 550 million, which made it a much higher number, but the actual number is 5391 as a benchmark for what it would cost to serve every address in the state based on our estimate of $550 million. This is well under that at 3543. So by building a partnership with Consolidated, they've freed up money for other CUDs. So our recommendation to the board is to approve this. At this point, we're going to have Southern Vermont do their presentation and answer board questions.
Excellent. So we'll recognize the folks from Southern Vermont CUD, and the floor is yours.
Oh, you muted, Eric?
It keeps muting me. Okay. All right, thank you. I think we can begin, and Brian Lim from Consolidated is going to be sharing the PowerPoint slides. So Brian, if you could share your screen for that.
Yes. Rob, can you give me access to share my screen?
You should have that ability now. I made you an attendee, so you should have right next to the lead button that should say share.
Yeah, I'm seeing only meeting organizers and presenters can share, and it's grayed out for me.
Let me work
While that is,
yeah, and Eric, it would be great if you could tee up and just introduce your team for us as well.
Absolutely.
There's some new faces that, at least for me, I'm not recognizing all of you.
Absolutely, we will. So first, I just want to say thank you, Madam Chair and board members, for your time today to hear the Southern Vermont CUD's grant application request. We are going to start with the introductions, and then we're going to end with any additional questions that may come about that we haven't answered based on what was asked of us last week. So we've answered a lot of that in this presentation, but of course, new ones may come up. So with that, Brian, we can go to the introductions, and I'll start that off. My name is Eric Hatch. I am the chair of the Southern Vermont CUD. I live in Bennington, Vermont, and I've been a member of the CUD since its inception, which formed shortly after Representatives Sibilia and James held a public meeting in Manchester in what seems like a very long time ago, but it only has been 3 years, an eventful 3 years nonetheless. I'll hand it over to my colleague, Michael Corey, who will introduce himself, who is the vice chair.
Hello,
I'm Michael Corey, Vice Chair of the Southern Vermont CUD, one of the reps from Shaftesbury. I've been with the CUD since 2020. In addition to this, my professional life, I've been involved with internet accessibility through the internet.org project, where I designed and executed the first accurate national level measurements of internet usage, awareness, and uptake in the Philippines, Tanzania, Paraguay, and other countries. Across its lifespan, that project put 100 million new users on the internet. I continue to work in the technology space. Recently joined the computer science faculty at Wayne College.
Michael, I'm sorry, it's probably just my old ears, but I'm losing a lot of what you're saying.
Oh, I'm sorry.
If you'd speak just a little up, thank you.
I will. Yeah, that's fine. Let me make sure I have the right mic on. I'm sorry. Yeah. Sorry, I'll do that again. Is that better?
Yes.
Sorry. I'm Michael, Vice Chair of the Southern Vermont CUD, one of the reps for Shaftesbury. I've been with the CUD since 2020. In my professional life, I've been involved with internet accessibility through the internet.org project, where I designed and executed some of the first accurate national level measurements of internet usage, awareness, and uptake in the Philippines, Tanzania, Paraguay, and other countries. Across its lifespan, the project put 100 million new users on the internet. I continue to work in the technology space and recently joined the CS faculty at Bennington College. Thank you. I will pass it on to Sheila.
All right, do we have Sheila?
Sorry, trying to stay out of the mix as much as possible. My name's Sheila Kearns. I am the current clerk of the CUD, and I have been involved in various leadership positions in the organization since the initial informational meeting in 2020. My most immediate professional experience prior to retirement has been as an IT manager with the state of Vermont, specifically the Department of Libraries. My work with the Department of Libraries involved leadership in the Fiber Connect project that brought middle mile fiber services to public libraries across the state. Thank you. Now I will turn it back to Eric.
Great, thanks, Sheila. Another partner of the CUD is the Bennington County Regional Commission, and Jonathan is here representing that group. Jonathan?
Thank you, Eric, and good afternoon to the board members. I am Jonathan Cooper, the Community and Economic Development Specialist with the Bennington County Regional Commission. And as Eric has mentioned, we've sort of had a bit of a partnership with the CUD for quite some time now, going back to some of those early days that have been referenced by both Eric and Sheila, when we were in more convenings and forum kind of mode rather than as political subdivisions of the state of Vermont. I happen to have with me a copy of the 2019 Southern Vermont Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy. This is a document that the BCRC, along with our colleagues in Windham County, the Windham Regional Commission, and the Brattleboro Development Credit Corporation prepared with significant public input, and it was ultimately approved by the U.S. Economic Development Administration. I mention it briefly because a CEDS is supposed to be a sort of an idea, an understanding of who we are, where we want to go, and how we are going to get there. And the project before you today is one that addresses, I believe, 3 of the 5 objectives of the Southern Vermont CEDS. I'd like to just mention them very briefly. One, we wanted to increase our population, which is about not just attracting new people, but retaining the people that we already have. We wanted to expand our business infrastructure to strengthen our innovation and economies and our entrepreneurial ecosystem. And lastly, we wanted to improve our physical infrastructure to make sure that Southern Vermont, the 2 counties, and of course, of which the CUD is a sort of subset, are business and resident ready. And one of the primary ways in which that was to be addressed was through expanding broadband access. The public-private partnership that we've seen sort of take root over the past year or 2 between Southern Vermont CUD and CCI has been one that's sort of heartened our feeling of sort of accomplishment in working with this partnership. So I appreciate the opportunity to be here today. So thank you very much, Eric, for that.
Thanks, Jonathan. All right, so also here today are our partners from Consolidated Communications. And I say partners in the truest meaning of the word. Over the past year plus, we have collaborated, designed, and worked through challenges as a team, always with the CUD's mission of universal access as the driver. It has always been an open, honest, and forthright manner. They have deep industry knowledge, experience, and to boot, New England and local ties. And with that, I'll hand it over to Eric Gar, president of Fidium.
Hi, everybody. My name is Eric Gar. Can you all hear me okay? I want to make sure my mic is working properly. Great. Madam Chair and Board, it's a pleasure to be here with you today. Again, my name's Eric. I'm the president of Consolidated Communications, as well as Fidium Fiber, which is our residential unit. I've spent the last 15 years trying to bring more and better internet to more Americans. I served in the Obama administration in 2009 and 10 at the FCC, where I helped draft the National Broadband Plan, which changed a lot of spectrum and rights-of-way policies to make it easier to build these networks at scale. After some time in government, I then went to Google, where I was the first senior employee that Google Fiber hired on the East Coast, where I launched their business in Raleigh, Durham, Charlotte, Atlanta, Nashville, and Huntsville. And about 18 months ago, I joined Consolidated Communications. We are not the same company we were 2 years ago. As we'll comment in the presentation, we've raised nearly $1 billion in capital to upgrade our fiber, upgrade our customer experience, and improve our workforce. And I'm responsible for that transformation, and I'm joined here by some of my teammates. I would also say that while I'm told I will always be a Flatlander, I moved to Norwich, Vermont a couple months ago. So I do now live in Vermont. So you'll have a local manager who's not too far. With that, I'd like to ask Mary Ellen Player to introduce herself.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mary Ellen Player. I'm the Vice President of Go-to-Market and Expansion at Consolidated. Much like Eric, I spent a large portion of my professional career at Google, 13 years there, most of which was spent as the General Manager of Google Fiber for the Charlotte, North Carolina market. I joined Consolidated about 15 months ago, so just after Eric, to be part of the transformation that we are proud to partner with the Southern Vermont CUD on today. My responsibilities include expansion, so working as we are working with the CUD all over our 22-state footprint, but really localized in Northern New England, Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine, as well as all field sales and go-to-market responsibilities. So having local managers who are right there explaining our product and helping folks get connected. I'd like to introduce you to some folks on my team who are a big part of this project. So I'll turn it over first to Brian Lim.
Thanks, Mary Ellen. I'm Brian Lim. I'm an expansion analyst at Consolidated. I joined the company around a year ago. And my role at Consolidated really focuses on working with communities like the Southern Vermont CUD to identify served and unserved addresses in their areas, identify potential sources of grant funding or subsidy they might have access to, and work with them to apply for that funding and get access to it. And with that, Stacy, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Brian. My name is Stacy Trudeau. I am the market manager for the Fidium product here in Vermont. Been here since March. It has been an absolutely incredible experience, especially working with the Southern Vermont CUD in this partnership. Prior to my time to coming to Consolidated, I was with AT&T Mobility for a little over 16 years. And until I was brought on as one of the senior management team members for Burlington Telecom, when they were in the midst of, we were really trying to figure out if it was viable to keep the doors open. Fortunately, I was able to bring a great team with me. We were able to keep the doors open and sell Burlington Telecom from the city to a private company, which was very exciting. And it's really great to be able to bring that knowledge and experience from Burlington Telecom, being a broadband fiber provider here to Consolidated. As I was born and raised here in Vermont, I'm very active in all the communities throughout the state of Vermont. So it's something that I'm very excited for and just really glad to be a part of the partnership.
Great. Thank you, Stacy. All right, so moving back to the slides, I want to address how did we get here? How did we get here, a CUD and an existing telecom provider? Well, as intended in the creation of the CUDs, each formed to study and address the localized challenges and opportunities to achieve our shared vision for solving the universality of rural broadband in Vermont. Here in the 14 southern Vermont CUD towns, we faced a number of existing providers who already were in our densest population areas, leaving the very remote and most expensive addresses without real broadband. So like all CUDs, we conducted a feasibility study early on, and that clearly indicated that our CUD would not have an achievable or sustainable business plan. So we then held discussions with DV Fiber, a neighboring CUD, that too quickly and clearly indicated that with their existing 24 member towns, adding our 14 to the end of the queue would not suffice for our district. We therefore made, which at the time seemed like a hard pill to swallow, the decision to partner with an existing provider. It has turned out, however, to have been the best decision and route to take for our CUD board and communities, because 3 eventful years ago, we could not have imagined a completion date of 2023, a very short 4 years since that Manchester community meeting. So it is with this background that we arrive here today, respectfully submitting our application for your consideration. And I just want to be sure that the slides are up and being presented. There, okay, great. All right, so the proposal overview. The CUD is seeking $9,009,085 in grant funding to cover phase 2A of our 3-phase universal service plan. Phase 2A covers 1,300 unserved addresses, and the target end date is before year-end 2023. Phase 1, 2A, and 2B will cover 99% of the total unserved addresses in our district. Phase 3 will cover the remaining 1%, and we'll go into that plan on a later slide. And just to reiterate, the CUD is requesting funds only for phase 2A. As for phase 1, well, as of this past Thursday, I am happy to announce phase 1 is complete, and our first customer in the center of the picture above is Star Volkmar, who is connected to the network. This photo is an impromptu celebration we had at Star's house to mark the occasion. Another important item to note is that with the completion of phase 1, 507 unserved homes were included and now can order fiber broadband for the first time. And these 507 were funded by Consolidated. Phase 1 covers Bennington, North Bennington, Woodford, most of Shaftesbury, a bit of Pownell, and the handful of homes in Glastonbury, which, by the way, isn't part of this CUD or any other CUD for that matter. They're very small. All right. So the next slide is the overview. And this is the Universal Service Plan's passings, costs, and timelines with 2A highlighted in yellow. The full cost of phase 2A is $12.3 million, but today the CUD is requesting $9 million. The $3.3 million difference is the cost of drops for each passing. Consolidated will fund those drops for both the served and unserved passings. As an aside, the CUD board did discuss ownership of those drops and increasing the request by the additional 3.3 million. However, it was decided and voted against that option because ownership would not yield any benefit to the community and at the same time reduce capital available for other CUDs that may not have a similar option of ownership. Okay. The next slide is a map of the completed phase 1 network. And those are the towns that I mentioned. The heaviest green part is Bennington, Shaftesbury to the north, Pownell to the south, and Woodford to the east. The next slide shows Phase 2A network. This is the funding request in blue. So when we couple this with our next slide, which is Phase 2B, and putting Phase 3 aside for the moment, this completes the construction of our fiber network within the 14 communities of the CUD. So layering on Phase 2B, you can see that it connects to the Phase 2A. Phase 2B is going to be built concurrently with Phase 2A. So they will be completed at the exact same time. As you might be able to see, it's hard a bit on this map, but Londonderry and Winhall in the upper right corner are included. And we can discuss more around their dual CUD membership in the additional questions section at the end of the slide deck. Okay. And so the Phase 2A cost details. We're going to start with what's not included in the grant request. There's a number of things: engineering costs, project management, overhead, the drops as already mentioned, and a contingency. Consolidated will cover those costs, including the contingency. What is included in the grant that the CUD funding would fund are wire center upgrades, core upgrades, and fiber, both aerial and underground, and CUD admin costs. This last line item primarily represents the hiring of paid staff during the construction phase, and also 2 years of a run rate. Okay. So for Phase 3, initially we had 126 addresses potentially left out of Phase 1 and 2. We called them the hardest 100. However, after our CUD did field visits, some of which are shown in the photographs to the right, as well as analyzing the GMP poll data, only 17 were deemed eligible for Phase 3. All others were not connected to the grid. And of those 17, we believe 13 are served out of New York, 3 out of Mass, and 1 by an existing Vermont-based provider from a town outside of the CUD. So conversations are already underway, but we have designated 2A as our priority, but keeping the pokers in the fire for Phase 3. It's important to note that we do not expect Consolidated would be the provider for any of the 17. The way the geography and networks are positioned, it would not make any sense to have them do that. Okay, on the next slide for ownership, the CUD will own all grant-funded infrastructure, excluding the core infrastructure, which Consolidated will upgrade both at the start of a construction with CUD funds, as well as over time to maintain and improve the networks. These improvements will not be funded by this grant. If the partnership were to be severed for any reason, we are able to lease the fiber or purchase wholesale service from Consolidated at a fair market rate set by an independent third party agreed to by both parties. This would allow the CUD to work with other providers to operate our assets using the services provided by Consolidated. We could also find a provider to incorporate the CUD's assets themselves. And of course, at the end of the 20-year contract, which is the initial term that we're signing, the CUD could elect to continue partnering with Consolidated or make other arrangements. Okay, pricing. So we feel our network offers very very competitive and consistent pricing for all addresses within the CUD, funded or not, where each address will receive the same statewide pricing as shown in this slide. Fidium, which is the consolidated service offering product, has a very simple, straightforward pricing structure. It's essentially what you see is what you get. It's an all-in-one monthly fee for your chosen speed, with no other charges, no router rental fees, no installation fee, except if you're going for the 2 GB package, or if you have a very difficult connection beyond 250 feet from the street, and then those are looked at. And also to note, none of this requires a contract between the subscriber and Consolidated. Okay. In terms of affordability, Consolidated participates in the FCC's connectivity program and Lifeline program, which provide qualifying customers a $30 and $9.25 monthly discount. Qualifying for these two benefits would mean that those most in need in our community would get the Fidium 50 meg plan for just $1 a month in their first year. It's $1 because the benefit actually exceeds the first year's monthly cost, and $1 is the minimum. And after the first year, the rate would rise to just shy of $16 per month, or $25 a month if they were not eligible for Lifeline. Okay, on the next slide, I'm going to hand it over. No, actually, we're talking about customer experience. So the customer service model, we want to talk about from two angles, because of course we're talking about Consolidated's customer service model that they have. One is from what I would refer to as the legacy era of Fairpoint, DSL, copper, coaxial, telephone, and the other era from Consolidated's modern fiber network, building and operating under Eric Gar and team. I do think it's fair to view them as distinct eras, as will be explained, and it's a topic that our CUD board discussed at length and ultimately concluded with confidence that the new era of customer service will provide excellent, reliable, timely, and courteous support to our subscribers. I'll pass this over to you, Eric, to provide more details.
Sure, thanks, Eric. I think it's obvious that our history has some difficult customer experiences in it. And this is a business where those do happen sometimes. But what's important is that the company make the appropriate investments to make sure those are at a minimum. And I'd make 3 points with regard to Fidium. The first is that the capital we've raised is not just for fiber. We're also investing in workforce training and better tools for our employees. Oftentimes, bad service experiences are a result of underinvestment, and I think we've certainly had that in our past, and we are changing that with the capital that we're investing. The second point I'd make is that the only way to really understand how you're doing is to measure it closely. So as part of our customer experience investment, we've installed a Net Promoter Score system. And so if those of you have been involved in high volume consumer businesses, or if you've ever shopped at Amazon or Target or any other consumer business, you're often asked a question at the end of each interaction: would you recommend this service to a friend? That question we ask after every call center experience, every website experience, every installation. When you aggregate all of that feedback, you can do 2 things with it. First, we can provide coaching and support to frontline employees who maybe made a boo-boo. The other thing we can do is we can actually see how we're doing and compare ourselves to other entities. This industry, communications, is often not at the top of the NPS charts. Net Promoter Scores range from -100 to +100. And this industry has a habit of being close to zero, sometimes in the low teens, maybe 20. And what I can share with you is we're 2 or 3 times that right now with Fidium. So we feel like out of the box, we're delivering a good experience in aggregate. Doesn't mean we don't make a mistake once in a while, we will, but we believe we're curing it quickly. And then the third point I would make is that we're happy to share that information with the CUD and with the board on a quarterly basis, if appropriate. And we are able to cut the data to make sure that we can see the CUD performance compared to the rest of our footprint. We can see the subsidized performance versus the unsubsidized performance and give you a good aggregate view of what customers think about this service. So I just say we've got a long way to go. We are better. And I think that the data that I see shows we're better, but we will not rest until we are awesome. And we hope to get there soon.
Thanks, Eric. All right, so on to the accountability portion of our partnership. Here we specify that the CUD receives notification of any data breach in line with Vermont's state data breach timelines and guidelines. In the event of a service outage, Consolidated has committed to notifying the CUD within 12 hours of the incident, but with the goal of notification as soon as practical. And to maintain simplicity, the outage notification will apply at the town level, not by address, based on whether they were funded by the CUD grant or by Consolidated. Net neutrality is required, and Consolidated certainly adheres to it. It adheres to Vermont's net neutrality standards. And a bit of interesting trivia, Eric Gar worked on the first version of the FCC's net neutrality guidelines when he was at that agency. And now performance reviews. Consolidated and the CUD will meet for quarterly performance reviews on the network in all 14 towns, regardless of whether they were CUD funded addresses or not, for the life of the contract. This is a key function of our partnership, where the CUD will have both the visibility and access to information and resources within Consolidated over the life of the contract. Should service quality suffer and the CUD is made aware directly or indirectly through these reviews, it can and will act as an advocate to resolve the issues and serve as a liaison with the entire CUD district community. I'm going to hand it back to Eric to talk about the Consolidated sustainability.
Sure, thanks, Eric. So we're a public company, so you can see all of our financial information. We're audited by the appropriate auditors. We submit to the appropriate cybersecurity audits with the federal government. So all of that information is available. The company has about 1.2 billion in operating revenue. Most importantly, we've raised nearly $1 billion to essentially future-proof the company. So we recognize that the products and services that we have on our copper network are not awesome. And in fact, they're not really what customers want in many respects. And so we're raising the money to try to change that circumstance. As you have observed in these meetings prior, this is a very expensive problem. So this may seem like a ton of money, but it would be, the state would benefit if you can support us to go even further than our capital will carry us. The last point I'd make is the $490 million sale last week kept us pretty busy. That was a wireless asset. And so even though you may see some sale activity from us, it's all in support of our fiber first strategy. So there's no change in strategy. And this was really part of our plan. We're trying to transform the company into a best-in-class fiber provider, and we've raised a significant amount of capital to do it. Back to Eric.
Thanks. Thank you. Okay. For the CUD's financial stability, we have included, as I mentioned earlier, $160,000 in costs to cover its operation for the course of the phase 2 construction period. It represents hiring paid staff and approximately an average monthly burn rate of $1,600. Typical expense examples for us are insurance, legal, consultants, internet services, minuting of meetings, and a treasurer stipend. All right. And the last slide, that is our presentation. And so thank you for the opportunity to present. Regardless of the application's outcome, I hope it was a strong request. On behalf of the Southern Vermont Communications Union District Board, I'd like to thank the VCBB, both the board and the staff. The staff have helped our CUD on matters big and small over weekends, early mornings, and late nights, and it has felt very collaborative and a great example of how we want our state government to work. I'd also like to thank Consolidated and its teams who have carried much of the technical and project weight in both the NTIA and this application. And of course, a special thank you to the Southern Vermont CUD Board for their dedication, engagement, and energy. Together, I think we have really come up with a truly public good. All right.
All right,
So,
thank you very, sorry, go ahead.
I was sorry, I was just going to say, great time for questions. We have some, and I would just ask Consolidated, please jump in to keep me honest on the answers and offer clarity throughout. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eric, and everybody else that presented. That was an excellent presentation. I'm going to turn it over to Holly and then followed by Laura, who both have had their hands up. So Holly, you're up first.
Actually, Laura had her hand up before mine. Would Laura?
Oh, okay, if that's the case, then I'm going to do Laura first, then you.
Great, thank you. Eric, thank you. And thank you to all of the members of the Southern Vermont CUD. I know this has been challenging. You have had a challenging area. Thank you for your resilience and your persistence and your leadership. I know you've also had some leadership challenges there. I'm really proud of you all. And points to Jonathan for rolling in the SEDS. Wow. Great job.
He's good.
Having said that, I know you know that I in particular have some very strong concerns about your operating partner. One of the biggest reasons for moving to this CUD model were the need to ensure that we had universal access for all Vermonters, and equally as important to me, if not the most important thing to me, was accountability. As you know, the state of Vermont does not have the ability, and the federal government does not use much ability to regulate internet service providers. And what we were able to regulate were our legacy phone lines, and we had an emergent and urgent what I consider to be a public safety issue opening up in Vermont around Consolidated's telephone lines and the maintenance of those lines. And in particular, right in your neighborhood, Reedsboro. And that really fueled the drive towards CUDs. And it fuels my skepticism and concerns and the questions that I have. And the questions that I have are really about accountability. And the questions are for you, Eric Hatch, and your CUD. I really want to, when we look at Consolidated and Fidium, we have the opportunity to look at track record or promises. And I think we have an obligation to look at track record until a new one is established. We have to think about what could happen if, we go back into those bad situations.
Sure.
And so I'm really interested in how you hold them accountable, and particularly around maintenance. I heard you talk about quarterly basis. And I'm happy for you to have Consolidated jump in, but it's really important to me that the CUD has a sense of how they're going to hold them accountable on this. On a quarterly basis, meeting about reliability or service quality issues. How do you envision that going? And what if you have kind of chronic problems with your provider? What will you do? Who do you think you will turn to? Where will you go for assistance?
Sure. I appreciate the question, and it is one that we have talked about probably the most on the board, because there are folks with divergent views, and we approached. Let me answer it in several different ways. One, we do look at this as a partnership rather than a transactional engagement. So we succeed when Consolidated succeeds, and vice versa. And the other piece that we have is we do believe that a fiber network is less problematic than a copper network for all those technical reasons supporting that. We also saw really, we've been impressed with the team at Consolidated. From the get-go, Consolidated has said they support the CUD model, which they say people probably wouldn't really buy that outside, but they do, and it's a great public-private partnership, and they have been very adamant in making sure that everything that we apply for and request funding for makes sense, and it's way above board. There's no potential conflict there. So that has given the board confidence in the team. We have several members on the board who have the DSL problems with Consolidated, and in the northeast corner of the district. Frankly, they're not sold yet because the proof is in the pudding. But to that point, Fidium is rolled out in the market today. They do have a small track record relative to their long years of copper-based networks, not only in New Hampshire, but they're live in a couple towns in Vermont as well. And this graphs that we've seen, the comparison between what the issues are with fiber versus not, it's day and night, and that is what has given us the comfort. As in terms of teeth in the contract, we had a real challenge. One is that the CUD wasn't going to be funding itself in such a way that there was an ongoing entity that can measure and take speed tests and to do other technical monitoring on an ongoing basis, because we plan to stay a volunteer CUD, and because we would be partnering with Consolidated to do those things. And that's why we opted for the quarterly review, because we feel like that is, I think we believe Consolidated is incented to do proper customer support. I think fixing the problem and communication probably is the best way to go about that. And to have an advocate kind of working inside of Consolidated who's representing the CUD, the entire district, and not just the funded ones, I think gives us an outsized leverage, not control, certainly, but influence on how problems are resolved. But we do have written into the contract that we can engage, invoke severability between now and the end of the contract if we feel that the service, the reliability is not what has been discussed, what has not been applied for in the grant, what has not been agreed on either latency or actual download speeds. We will know whether we are getting notified timely of outages, of any data breaches, should those rarely occur. And so I think we'll see. I think it's the quarterly sit down with a senior person in their support team that's going to tell us all of that stuff, and we can use our position as advocates for the consumer to just make it right. And that's really what the board has agreed on multiple occasions when we've talked about it and discussed it.
I have two other questions. Thank you, Eric. And I'll tell you both of the questions. Of course, one of them is empty, leaving my 50-year-old brain right now. So maybe it'll just be one. How I was interested in the presentation about the decision that the CUD made not to own the drops, and the comment that you made that it wouldn't be worth it to own that. So I'm interested in learning more about that. And I have my second question. So before I forget it, my second question is, as the CUD remains all volunteer, just thinking about sustainability in the organization in order to maintain accountability for all of the communities that have joined your CUD. So if you could just talk a little bit about how you envision the sustainability going for the CUD, if you're, without staff, are there any stipends imagined, etc.
Okay, sure.
Thank you.
So the first one on the drops, we did go back and forth on this. What really was the determinant was, well, what is the value? Where would the value come into play if the CUD were to own those drops versus not owning those drops? And we thought of two in particular and discussed those. One, if Consolidated goes bankrupt or into receivership or in Chapter 13, what would happen to that piece of it? Would owning those drops as part of the network help us, neutral, or harm us? We felt it didn't harm us, not necessarily helped us, because it was really dependent on how that receivership ended. Does Consolidated get financing to get back on track and out of bankruptcy, or does someone come in and take over and just pick up from there? Either way, the CUD is going along for the ride anyway. Otherwise, if Consolidated does go under and is not looking like it's going to come out of bankruptcy for a while, we do have the ability to, for the network itself, is to go out and use Consolidated as a wholesaler essentially, and look for another provider if they have not remediated those breaches. There isn't a standard for the drops. So if a brand new, if Verizon came in and took over to connect to their network, if they're going to use Consolidated's network and just bridge the two, again, it's not any difference to the CUD whether we own those or not. We're going to have the same amount of leverage, which is not a whole lot probably with anyone. And then the other one is at the end of the contract, if we decided to go our own way and maybe go a locally owned route or whatever the case might be, who knows in 20 years. The technology is going to change, and if the fiber itself is standardized, but if the drop technology is not compatible with how Consolidated installed those drops and the particular specifications, they may have to be reinstalled anyway. So it didn't help clarify ownership demarcations. It didn't really provide any additional leverage for us in any way. And it was something that if the CUD needs to get back involved because of Consolidated's not there for whatever reason, then you're going to have to discuss those with a new provider as well. So I'm not sure if I answered that entirely satisfactory.
That's fine. That's fine.
Michael or Sheila or Consolidate, if I have missed out anything, I think we're good there. Okay. So the question about sustainability, we have talked about that. We really put that aside for now so that we could focus on getting the applications through. But we have broached that to say, okay, in 2 years, potentially by the end of next year, we could have everyone done theoretically. So what is there for the CUD to do? Some of the ideas that were tossed out were, taking on additional missions. I don't know, whether that would be required legislatively, but, if everyone has potential access to fiber, they may not have the means or the hardware inside, like a laptop or an iPad. And maybe that is something that we could fundraise for as a group, to kind of continue and build on that initial mission of getting universality out there. But the other piece is, of course, maintaining the quality service reviews to make sure that they are there. We do have baked into the option, into the contract, the option to change it from quarterly to semi-annually if it just doesn't appear that quarterly works 5 years from now. Then we could do that, or we can increase them as well to monthly or something. And certainly during, people are signing up now to the network. We have another 1.5 years where we are meeting probably, we've been meeting weekly with Consolidated to go over everything. So we'll still be in very close contact, and there are things to do. So we'll be able to monitor and find out how the service is going, and work on kind of the process that we want to follow post-construction for monitoring, reporting, liaising with the community at large as well.
Okay. And the 160,000 for staffing, that is, who will be hiring that person? Where will that person be working from?
So we want to hire someone that is either an executive director or someone to project manage through the construction period, because it is such a short-term assignment. But we figured it's going to be, a fair amount to pay to get someone who's qualified and available to do that. And they don't have to be based out of the Bennington County area. There are, I think, options with time slicing existing directors and executive assistants or whatever their title is, that are doing this thing that maybe would be beneficial for all parties to join up with the Southern Vermont CUD.
So, but who will literally hire this this person? Will it,
board.
and who will they work for? Will they work? So will they work for the CUD? Like, would you contract with BCRC, or do you have the wherewithal yourselves as an organization?
Well, we probably would go through BCRC. We've done that before. We just kind of use them as a pass-through. But I don't want to speak for you, Jonathan, in case I'm saying something completely wrong. But we don't have any employees now. Our stipend, is just that. So we haven't really thought about that piece of it yet.
Okay. Thank you, Eric. This is really helpful. This last questions that I've been asking, I think, are the pieces that I'm most going to want to talk about a little bit later. But
okay.
Thank you. Sustainability. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Laura. Let's move over now to Holly.
Boy, how do you like? This is a project where you have to be named Eric to have the leadership gumption to make this happen. So I want to first congratulate both of you. In my 12 years back in Vermont, I've been part of multiple attempts to get private sector and public sector organizations to collaborate. And this is as close as I've seen them come. So this is really good news. And, you know, hats off to you. I think it's worth noting that for every question that Representative Sibilia has raised, you are able to say, Eric, that the CUD considered the issue and made a decision. And, you know, one of the things we're here to do is to support the CUD in its decision-making process. So it's really great to hear that you've deliberated over all of this. To Eric Garr, I would say, I don't know what happened, but there seems to have been a culture shift of order of magnitude. I hope we can attribute it to you and that you're going to spend the next 25 years at Consolidated. But having said that, the enforceability of this agreement, the devil is in the details. So I note that in the termination provision, there is a reference to material breach, and it's not explained what raises to the level of materiality, but I might not have seen it in my cursory review. So Eric, could you tell us what kind of identification of breach there really is here? It's great that you have a quarterly review, but it's a quarterly review really for the construction period. And then what?
I'll hand it over to you, Eric, but just to answer your question, Holly, at the end, it's for the life of the contract. So,
and can you remind me what the term is?
20 years.
20 years, okay.
We probably won't even need to enact the quarterlies because we are meeting through the construction period much more frequently. Right now, we're still meeting weekly, but you know, as that tapers down at the end of next year, that's probably when a quarterly would kick in. Before then, we would know what the reporting is that we can get. We can go through and understand what's in there, and that will allow us to, learn the reporting and ask the questions to kind of get at the real problems and find out where they are and how things do get remediated within the organization, so we can kind of know the internal workings of problem management where they might exist.
Would you expect your paid executive director to be doing that contract managing and tracking those deliverables?
Yes.
We had we've initially thought that the executive would go through the construction period, so through the end of 2023. But going forward, it would revert back to the board, and in order, really, that would be the reason to meet for the board, is to review how things are going on the network and just make discussions and recommendations at that point.
So I just see the term material breach invoked in the kind of the overarching agreement. And I just don't know whether there's any detail someplace that says what the service standard is, what the consistency of the rates are, what the connection requirements are, and what the maintenance requirements are. Is there any, I mean, it could be good that there's no specificity. Have you talked about standards for that, for that performance?
We have, and right up until the end here, because for example, with the NTIAA, they did require certain specifications and requirements in there, which we both sides had agreed to. they weren't particularly onerous. It was like a 100 millisecond latency and a couple other.
Yeah, let me help you out there, because actually there are references in there that state in two places that they will meet the performance requirements. They've agreed to meet the performance standards established by the Vermont Community Broadband Board, as well as where Eric's going. They've committed to 99.9% uptime, which is a little over 8 hours a year.
Mhm.
And they've committed to meet the FCC standard, which in my opinion is a good standard, which meaning 100% or 100 milliseconds or better for 95% of the time.
Great. So that's actually all I need to know about that. Do I understand that the service will be presented as consolidated service and that the pricing for the district will be uniform with other consolidated pricing?
Yes, within the district and within the state.
Okay, that's
It's
great.
one.
And I think this is a question for Eric Gar. I am really aware of the fact that ISPs can participate in the ACP affordability program, and yet the take rate on that program remains incredibly low. Could you tell us what the take rate for the ACP program is against either the total Vermont population or that segment of the population in your service area that is eligible? Are you able to say?
I am not. I can tell you that you are correct. It's not a simple program. We have trained our call center team on the program so that when someone calls, we can help walk a customer through it. I don't have the stats in front of me. We feel like we've gotten a fair number of folks on it. I don't have it broken down based on the eligibility percentage, et cetera, et cetera. But we've invested a fair amount of time in it to try to support it. If that's an important calculation, I'm happy to do it. But I don't at the top of my head know like what the denominator of eligibility in Vermont is over the take rate that we've seen.
I think I would offer that as a general education for our board and our
Sure.
team here.
Yeah, I'm not sure the denominator is easy to find.
Right.
And that's really a question about what do we know about Vermont income demographics and things like that. But happy to do that research if the group would benefit from it.
Something go
Oh,
ahead.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I just wanted to raise something with regard to the education piece. One of the areas of confidence that we have with Consolidated is that they have and will conduct rollout meetings in each of the towns to which they're bringing Fidium, regardless of whether it's a CUD town or not. And I believe, and I think our board believes strongly, that in that rollout process, one of the major components will be education about the ACP program and the Lifeline. And with our local knowledge of our communities, knowing exactly who we will reach out to make sure that they understand how that works and to make sure that the process that Consolidated uses to support customers who seek those programs is a user-friendly one.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry.
I just wanted to also mention that both Eric Hatch and Christine made some representations about breach that you asked about, and I endorse what they said. So I want to make sure there was no disagreement.
Well, that's a perfect opening for me because I do want to say that as much as I love this collaboration, once you're married to your ISP, it's really challenging to get a divorce. And so the enforceability of this agreement is tough. It really is. And then you add to the fact that you're asking the VCBB to spend federal funding on a system that's owned by a commercial carrier, which is permissible under the statute, under this collaboration. But where are the teeth? How do we hold paper on that? How do we have performance that represents the public good? And so one of the things I'm just going to muse about out loud is whether staff wants to invent, with the assistance of Eric or Eric, some criteria for monthly for annual check-in or title to the system that we're paying for. A form of title that would revert to the state. One of the things we're supposed to be responsible for anyway, if performance is an issue. I don't have enough information at the top of my head to offer a solution, but I am raising those questions that have to do with the way the contract is structured.
Hi, this is Stacy. Can I just add a point about the Lifeline program? So the Lifeline program for broadband is very, very near and dear to my heart. When I was actually at Burlington Telecom, that was when the FCC actually introduced the Lifeline program for broadband. And I did petition the state, and Burlington Telecom became the first Lifeline provider for broadband. Since that time, that was a huge focal point for myself and my team to really educate all individuals about how important the program is and that we were there to assist them, especially with their children in school. These are our future leaders, and most of these individuals are the ones that truly benefit from the program. So I just want to really make it clear that my team and I here in Vermont are really focused on this program because there are so many people who truly can value from it.
Thanks, Stacy.
Okay, Holly, are you all set with your questions? Okay. All right, I'm going to jump in. This is Patty Richards. Thank you all for great presentations and discussions so far. I had a question for Consolidated relative to their build-out plans relative to this project. Can you share how, so you're going to do a significant build-out and investment in the same area, the Southern Vermont CUD. How much of that is being funded through RDOF?
Sure. Brian Lim, can you pull up the grid chart from the presentation? And I think that'll help me answer the question precisely.
That should be on screen now. Let me know if you aren't seeing it.
I don't see it yet.
See if I can reshare and see if that fixes anything.
So Eric, while that's that magic is happening to make that come up,
Yeah.
I want you also to help me address with the RDOF funding commitment you have, how much public accountability what is your reporting structure for those dollars back to the agency, the federal government for those dollars? In other words, you've got reporting hoops to jump through, correct?
Yes, we
Can
do.
you describe that a bit for us? I don't need to know all the details, but just a bit.
Yeah, so the reporting requirements for RDOF, and I may have to phone a friend for the specifics, but we essentially have a set of latency requirements. We have to describe how we're treating the subsidy. We have to provide financial audits, all sorts of things that the FCC requires of us. We also have to fill out a long form proposal, which we've done and which have already been accepted. So we had to go through a process similar to this to even get the award. The way the math works, we are investing a lot of capital in your state and in Southern Vermont. So phase 1A, and actually before I even go through the phases, just to remind everybody how RDOF works. RDOF is an operating subsidy. So we don't get any capital to build the network. If we build the network, we get an operating subsidy. So it still requires us to invest our capital, and the capital cost here is our capital. The subsidy is actually quite a bit less than this. We don't have it on this chart, but I think all in the total subsidy for Southern Vermont, I think it's only a couple of $1 million that we'll receive from an operating standpoint.
Okay.
So just to kind of go through, phase one is done. That included about 6 million of our capital for about 12,000 homes. About 750,000 of that were for some RDOF locations. When we go to phase two, hopefully the state will honor this request, and that will allow us to spend basically 12.3 with 9 coming from the state on the 1,300 unserved addresses that the state's accountable for. There are 1,100 RDOF addresses that are in territories we were awarded. We will spend 4 million of our capital on those RDOF addresses. So that's our capital to go to get those subsidy. And then, as we've discussed, there are some really unusual outliers that we have told the CUD we could do at an exorbitant cost. I'm not sure it's good public policy to have us do it. And that's why the CUD is going to, talk to some of those other providers that would do that. So if you kind of look at it all in, we're funding, maybe it's 6 million of our capital for our purposes, and then another 5 that is somewhat underwritten by the RDOF operating subsidy.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful.
Sure, and just to clarify our intent, the unserved addresses don't neatly fall anywhere. They're sort of in different places, and so this was a way for us to try to do all the work at once to solve the full unserved problem in the CUD at once.
Okay. But with the RDOF funds, you have accountability back to the federal government for those funds, correct?
Yes, to the FCC, back to those funds.
Thank you. So that's very helpful.
Yeah.
The other thing I just wanted to share with you and make sure that it's out there relative to a public statement is that Act 71 requires that the assets of the CUD belong to the CUD, and in the event the CUD can't perform, it ultimately belongs to the state. So you're aware of that fully?
We're fully aware of that provision of the law.
I would like both Erics to chime in once I get done babbling here. Is that in the contract? That's referenced in the contract? So, we have great people that are on this call, but 5 years from now, 10 years from now, different people are sitting in seats. Is that reference in the contract relative to the CUD's assets? They belong to the state. It's a public interest to the state.
I don't know if it's in the contract. We know that it would go to the state. And the reason is because when we were talking about if Consolidated goes under for whatever reason, some of the third-party fees that they pay for pole fees or conduit fees or whatever that might be would fall to us on our assets. And the comment was made, and it was a correct one, that if Consolidated goes under, the CUD is going